Welcome to the Beyond the Business podcast. In here, we dive into winner mindset, entrepreneur spirit, and millionaire secrets. Today, we're meeting with Chris Jordan. Chris Jordan works with amazing people like Lewis Howes, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, Gary Vee, Damon John, and he runs his own podcast, Personal Brand Coach. Today, we're going to dive into many different things. I'm excited to present the episode. Chris Jordan, how's it going today? How are you going?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very grateful to be here and excited to go into all things personal branding, anything that you want to ask. Let's dive into it.
100%. So we divide our podcast into 3 different sections. So we have section 1, that's our short answer section, okay?
All right.
We have 10 different questions. You can only answer 5.
Okay.
We have section 2 that we get into the stories, right? We talk about your story. We talk about your background, maybe your advice you have for winners. And then the last section, I'm going to pick your mind about a secret you have.
All right.
Okay.
I'm into it.
Okay. So first section, you're a host and you did a lot with Lewis Howes, right? He talks a lot about greatness on his podcast. What was your definition of greatness, or what do you think the best definition of greatness you heard on the show?
That's a good one. I think that the one that resonates with me the most is leading with service and trying to be a giver instead of taking from people. And when you do that, you're able to create multiple win-win-win situations. And a lot of the people from actors, athletes, billionaires, a lot of people would share those similar sentiments. And that really resonated with me.
I love that. So now you only have 4 questions left.
Okay.
Like I said, you can either skip or you can answer the question. Okay. Next question is about legacy. What legacy means to you? Is legacy important?
I think legacy is not as important as we may end up tricking ourselves to think. However, I think that I want to believe that the legacy for maybe the 20 to 50 years after we die last. And I do think that through creating content that people can watch 100 years from now, we'll be able to do that. And so that is why I emphasize creating content, building a brand. But I also don't get too caught up in the legacy because I think it can make us fearful to try things sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then relevance. Do you think relevance? Obviously, there's people that had huge brands in the past, right? They've been falling off. There's people that are relevant for a minute. Maybe they fall off. Maybe they're no longer relevant. What's your thoughts about relevance? Do you think it's important? Do you think you should strive to have it?
I don't think that you should strive to be relevant for the sake of being relevant. I have worked with many people that are in the celebrity realm of things, and I can tell you that it doesn't solve all of the problems that you might think it could. And typically, I think that if you become relevant for serving people, trying to help people, and you just happen to become more relevant because of that, then that's great. But if you are going out in the world to be relevant, to me, that sounds pretty miserable. And I feel like our energy could be better spent somewhere else.
Is that what you've seen like a lot of the people you work with do, or you just work with a whole variety?
Yeah, I think like I've been very fortunate with the people that I've worked with, and a lot of them are in that personal development realm where they focus on serving and they focus on helping people. And because of that, that's why they have the audiences that they have. In the past, I have done some work in like the reality television world, whereas like those people were relevant for the season of one of their shows and now they're not. And I know that sometimes it's hard for them to deal with that. But they became famous for partying on television, and it's just it just is like a different thing to deal with. But the people that I find that focus on the value, when they become relevant, it's more meaningful, and then it just really is like your opportunity to help more people just multiplies.
Do you have any thoughts about the TikTok ban or anything going on with TikTok?
Yeah, I think that it will be really unfortunate if something like that were to happen. I think that ultimately, what it says for a lot of us is that never build on a platform that can be taken away. Typical advice around this is to build your audience on your email. Secondly, I would say your audience on podcast, because it's distributed on so many different platforms than just one.
Mhm.
But if you are only making TikTok content, which a lot of people are in that situation now, they're all kind of fearful, like what the heck is about to happen in the next couple of weeks? Like they're unsure. And so the smarter thing for them to have done years ago is to build the audience on TikTok, try to drive them to their email list, send them out to some of the other platforms where it makes sense, instead of putting all of your eggs in one basket, because like we don't own any of these platforms and stuff like this. This would be major, but it could happen. I think something else will, something will come in and save the day, but I would just say don't rely on one source.
Okay. You have one last question.
All right.
Section. So obviously there's a lot of Gen Z, Gen Alpha people entering the creator economy. What are your thoughts of them entering it? What have you seen about them?
I think that, right now we're still early stages for the creator economy. I think that there's just never been a better time to start taking part. I feel like right now is where it's become extremely normal for every person that you might be in school with, or your neighbors, or just people you pass on the street, to like possibly be making content and building personal brands and trying to enter the creator economy. It's so much more normalized. Whereas like a decade ago, like I would get made fun of from like people in school. And so with that, it's interesting because now everybody has a chance to be a creator. And I believe that everyone should. However, it's going to only become more and more normal. And so I feel like people right now, like it's the time to take advantage of it. Now, I think with like, certain generations, it's more like, how are you approaching the creator economy? And is it something that like you will be happy with, a couple of years from now? That's something to think about. Thinking about the long term of the creator economy is where I think a lot of people mess up. And some people will think if they blow up and go viral, that it will last forever. And we're now that it's been over like a decade where it's been normalized, we're seeing the first cycle of people that are like, I was viral and I moved to LA, made a bunch of money, all this stuff. And then they had to move back home because they blew it all because they thought it was going to last forever. So I think that's interesting. And I think if people approach the creator economy with a long-term view of it, those are going to be the people that will last and stay around.
I want to ask you, obviously you work with creators, right? You've seen the creator economy for a while. You've been in it. What advice do you have for those people, the people entering the creator economy right now?
Yeah, I'm super glad you asked this question, because this is something that I'm definitely really passionate about, that I think is a little bit different from the usual take on it. But I think that most people's approach to creating content, building their personal brand, is I want to create content and reach the masses and reach a ton of people. And that's when I will feel successful with it, or when it will be worth my time. I, however, have never had a massive audience of my own. One day I might. However, I don't actually care too much about that, because through creating content and building a personal brand where people are able to know me for the work that I've done with creators and seek me out for advice and invite me on podcasts, I don't need millions of followers or even thousands. I have a couple thousand here and there, but I've been focusing on trying to serve and talk to the core audience I want to. And through that, I've been able to open up so many doors to different jobs, to different clients, to just meeting people that I otherwise would have probably never had the chance to. And that is why most people refuse to start creating stuff, because they're like, well, I'll never reach millions of people. And it's like, you don't have to. If you reach 10 people and one of them is like the right contact for you, it can change your life. I have experienced it time and time again. So I think my advice is to be very clear again about the long-term play of entering the creator economy and defining what success looks like for you. So maybe it's 1 million followers. I honestly think that's not the best one. I instead would say It's the 100 incredible relationships you'll be able to build over this year through meeting people, or it's the 10 clients that you pick up from people that have been looking at your content and are interested in working with you. That's way more achievable than a million followers. And I know that having over a million followers sounds awesome, but for some people, like, they still struggle to pay their bills. So it doesn't solve all the problems that people think. And what people don't realize is that there's actually so much they can do with less, like just a couple hundred, couple thousand followers.
I love that. I love that. I feel like, just to get to my story a little bit, right? Because I feel like yours and my story are pretty similar. Not similar when it comes to the creator side, right? But similar when it comes to business in general. Is you were talking about how a small thing can make a big difference.
Mm,
And how I actually got into the insurance space is I was making newsletters on LinkedIn. Someone
love
reached
it.
out to me and was like, "Oh, you're studying economics. You're growing. I can see you're like fascinated in these types of stuff. Would you be interested in looking into helping people with their finance?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know. Let me see." And I went into an interview, right? And now I have connections in that space just because of that one decision. Instead of just stay in class all day and like just do my homework, to
Mm,
get out there, make LinkedIn newsletters that no one read, but he read.
right. Right. The one person had to read it. And that's all it took. I love that. That's such a good anecdote. Like, that's such a good, like, proof of what I'm talking about. It is possible. And some people just are like, no, that's not true. I'm like, no, we're two examples of it. Just listen to us.
So I want to ask about your example of that. So obviously, that relates to one of the books I was reading recently, right? It's called The Third Door. We have the
Mhm.
first door where everyone gets in line. They're all in line for this nightclub. They go through that line. We have the second door where you have to be VIP. There's only certain people in. But what Alex Banyan talks about is the third door. You're able to get out
Mhm.
of line and go through the back door. So what's your experience getting on Lewis Howes' podcast, getting into that industry?
Yeah. So I'll give you the most tactical thing that you can do. When I first started out creating content and wanting to work for people, I really wanted to work for Gary Vaynerchuk. I was obsessed with his content a handful of years ago. I was just getting out of high school, ready for hustle culture. Later on burned out because of that. That's a different conversation. But I still have deep respect for Gary Vaynerchuk. And a lot of people wanted to work for him. Like, it just an astronomical amount of people, not for like his media company, but like wanted to be on like what they called Team Gary V. And so a lot of people were applying and they were sending him messages hoping that he would see it. And I was like, well, I could do that, but like, who's on his team? And so I found a couple of the guys that worked on his team and I followed them on Instagram and I DM'd them and said, hey, if there's ever anything that I could support you with in your work there, I'd be happy to do it for free. I just want the experience and I really love what you guys are up to. They appreciated that I wasn't like hard selling, like having an expectation. I was giving them value. I was like, I'll edit videos for you, I'll do photos, like whatever you need. They were like, okay, cool. Like, we'll think about that. That couldn't have, sometimes maybe didn't end up leading somewhere. But for me, it did, because they had a shoot going on in Florida and they were like, we need someone there. And they knew that I was in Florida. And so they called me up and they're like, hey, will you go do this shoot? And I was like, yes, I will. I was like, I don't need to get paid anything. I don't care. And I went, did that shoot, sent it back. They were super happy with it. And from there, I then just started working with, not specifically Gary Vee's team. I worked with his brother. I worked with the sports agency that's one of Gary's companies. And then I ended up moving to New York City and I got to meet Gary. And he knew me. He was like, oh, you're the guy who films all of our sports stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And it was a way that I broke into this thing that so many people would love to go and do. But my third door approach was like, well, let me go to who is working with them and let me reach out, not with a request, just to say, I reached out with a offer of giving them value, of helping them, of trying to be a friend. And that was my third door into that. And that relationship led to every other job that I had because people knew that I worked with him and did that content. Somebody happened to be working with Lewis Howes and they thought of me and they were like, "Hey, are you available?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And so then that led to a very long time working with Lewis and working on the School of Greatness podcast. And now that that's on my resume, a lot of people know me from that. And so now my third door is the fact of what I've done in the past can really speak volumes of what I can do for people now. And there's a lot of other people that there's nothing wrong with this, but like study all the personal brand stuff and they could know everything, but they may have not like done it yet. They haven't like been working behind people to like really learn what the day-to-day looks like. And for me, I knew that I wanted to pause on really building my own thing for a second so I could just go and learn the ropes and work behind people. And now that I've done that long enough, I like, okay, now I can create stuff and now I'm focusing on that. And it's coming from a place of knowing what that day to day looks like. And I can now design my business and my creator business in a way that feels really aligned to what I want to do in the future.
And is that what so obviously you were talking about, hey, I went through this store, right? I went through this process. Tell me more about this process of the balance between building yours and then building other people. Because I know
Yeah.
you're focused on that personal brand game right now. You're focused on the podcast. You're focused on your business, but also you're
Mhm.
helping creators as well.
So it's a very big balance working for other people and also trying to build your own thing. A lot of people end up not building their personal brand because they're too busy with, their day job or the business that they're building. And that's valid. And it is hard to balance it. My advice typically for those people is like, if you just get one post up a week, just people being able to see you 52 times over a year makes them remember you more than the people that you never see posting. So at least one, for the love of God, just please give me one thing so we can start seeing you consistently. Finding the balance really comes down to what you want to do. Do you want to build a more of a like creator business that's, where you're creating content that can be monetized, you're doing courses, memberships, that stuff, or do you want to use content to help fuel your business and help you get clients? For me, I wanted to get clients a couple months ago as I started to do this more intentionally. And it worked really well for that. And again, I didn't need thousands of followers. I had like 1,000 followers on LinkedIn, and my background helped speak for me for sure. But the content I started putting out was attracting people that had never heard of me before. And then they were like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. And it turned into a few clients for me. Now I'm in this place where I'm like, oh, I took on so much client work. And it's actually more important for me to do the content because I realize like I love the content and I've spent a lot of years like being kind of like the guy behind the guy, and I'm really like wanting to embrace, putting out my own content because the amount of impact can be multiplied so much. But it just depends on the season. Like that's what I intentionally want to build towards. But a couple months ago, I intentionally wanted to build to get clients, and so I focused. Got a couple posts out a week. I didn't need to do every day because I just needed if I did 2 posts a week and I got a warm lead that turned into a client from one of those posts, then that was success to me. Whereas now my metrics, success to me looks like posting almost every day, and then working on building like a wait list and stuff for a course and newsletter and that stuff.
So, who inspired you to do this from the get go? You said Gary Vee. Was
Gary
there
Vee was
anyone?
the first. I mean, I've been obsessed with the internet and YouTube ever since I was a kid. I've been on YouTube watching stuff since like 2007. So I really was like early adopter of what has now become really like mainstream creator economy. Like I was the kid that made videos that at a time where like I would get made fun of when kids eventually found those videos. Whereas now it's so normal. Everyone has a TikTok and is making content. Um, but I guess I fell in love with the idea of entertaining and performing and all of that stuff. But then as I grew up, I still love that. But I was like, oh, I like marketing and I like branding and I like, content strategy and found that I felt pretty good at it and like was able to help people with it. And so now though, now I get to blend them all together where it's like we'll talk about branding and content strategy and all that stuff, but like I also don't want to bore us to death. Like I want to have a little bit of fun and like crack
Mhm.
some, jokes, whether they're good or bad every once in a while. Like still want to be myself. And so but I've been able to practice it for a long time. But it was just fun for probably like the first 7 years before I then tried to start thinking about turning it into a career.
Is it no longer fun?
It is still fun. It is still fun, but it changes. And
Yeah.
it's actually the hardest thing that most people that entering because if you want to become a creator and build your personal brand around something, a lot of people go to like, well, what are their hobbies? What are they passionate about? And you do have to have this conversation of like, if you love producing music and you want to
Mhm.
build your personal brand around being a producer and making content around it, there's sometimes where you might feel like, oh, I'm making this music for the content and less for fun. Like there just is a balance there that isn't really an issue if you're aware of it. But some people will just end up, being really, really burnt out. And I've experienced that a lot. But now I'm coming into this where I'm also a lot of people will burn themselves out and make it not fun because they're like, I have to post this many times every single week or I'm going to fail. And I always say, if you make good content, the right people will show up for it over time. And if that is once a week, again, that is 52 times for people to spend time with you. If you post 365 days in a row, I'm not even going to watch all of that. No one can consume all of it. But, if you do post every day, you know, I might see your Monday and Thursday, and then, Julia is going to see your Tuesday and Wednesday. It's like different people see it at different times. So that's where it can be cool to post every day, but don't stress yourself out over it. I always tell people, let's just wait until you feel ready because then the content that you make, whether it's a video, podcast, just a blog post, it will be better quality. So then it's more valuable for the person that consumes it, which then makes them like you more and build more trust and it solves the problem. But there's some people who are like, I need to post 3 times a week, and they're like sweating over it. And I'm like, it's okay. Like it is all right. The world is not going to end.
And now that what's it called? Now that you know that because you've been through the experience, you've seen that, you've been through the burnout. A lot of people are starting right now. They don't know that, right?
Yeah.
You realize, oh wait, this is what I have to do because this is what the gurus or people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
We can see Gary Vee doing that. We can see Alex Hormozi putting out content every day. We can see
Mm-hmm.
Casey Neistat that did the Daily Show,
Yeah.
and that's how he went from 100,000 to millions and millions of subscribers.
Yeah.
And I feel like that gave false expectations of how to grow.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I do think so because it's a very important point because people will see certain people that have really big personal brands. And they're like, well, they're everywhere. I need to be everywhere. And the reality is they have teams. They have 10 to 20 plus people working on their content. If
Yeah.
you have that many people that could work behind you, then that's great. And you can get to that point. But if it's just you or just you and like an assistant or something, don't put that pressure on yourself to carry the weight that someone else has 20 people working on it for them. Like it's just a very different game. And that's really been one of the biggest lessons I actually learned from working with Dr. Benjamin Hardy was I think he got it maybe from Elon Musk, but we always talked about it was like questioning assumptions. Like you see what a Gary Vee is doing or Alex Hormozi, and you're like, I assume I need to do all of that. And it's like, no, you probably don't. Like if you are, for you, like, right, like talking about like finance stuff and all that, to me, it makes sense that like LinkedIn, I mean, yeah, someone found you and like now you have opportunities because of LinkedIn. I don't know if that would have happened as much on Instagram, maybe, but like maybe not. And so it's like all you needed to be doing was creating on LinkedIn for you to have an opportunity. If at some point you had the bandwidth and you could post to more platforms, then that's cool. But a lot of people think they need to post to all platforms and then they post to none. And that is really like the biggest thing that I encourage people is to question where you need to be. Really choose like 1 to 2 platforms, whatever you can actually keep up with and excites you.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think it's super important to understand that, right? The balance between everything. And I know you were talking about my process, right? I posted on LinkedIn. I got into finance. I feel like there's a lot of people that like overcomplicate it or overthink it when it comes to starting content because I think they have to be fancy. They think it's just like all the grammatical errors, right?
Mm-hmm.
and they're all put together. But at the end of the day, it's like people are more worried about their content than they're worried about your content.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the reasons I got into it is I was like, oh, I'm already having ideas. I'm already having thoughts. I'm already sharing stuff with my mother. I'm like sharing things on notes and like writing down notes,
Mm-hmm.
or you forget it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Most of the thoughts you have, you forget. So it's like if
Mm.
you think it's a good thought and you're gonna forget it anyway, you like might as well share it.
Exactly. No, it's totally true. There's literally no downside to sharing things that you think are valuable and will help other people.
Mhm. And I feel like what Gary Vee does and what a lot of good creators do is they look back and they're able to find that thought, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, I'm able to draw the connections now, which is why
Yep.
people like write journals and stuff.
Yep. Absolutely.
So when it comes to obviously you're working on the building your brand right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're all like building our brand, building our personal brand. You said you went through the thought process of like, a posting and like what when it comes to like your thought process behind the values you want to have your brand be, or like the purpose of the brand. How do you come up with
Mm.
what you want?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I probably can always put into better words, and it will. What I found is it evolves, and some people will spend a lot of time up front thinking about what they should be, and then they
Mhm.
start making content, and it like doesn't fully fit to that because they were basing on what it should be versus like when you naturally create, like what actually makes you excited. And so for me, like although I help people with their personal brands, like I'm not a person that's like, hey, I'm gonna help you scale by 1,000% in 90 days. I don't really care about that. I want to help people that understand it's a long-term game, also understand that like, maybe it just is a couple hundred followers and that will get them the clients that they need for whatever their service is. Like, and I just want to help them be able to show up authentically and enjoy the process and be able to express themselves in ways that they're not used to, but help them through that to where they're like suddenly, as an example, I have a client who we just launched her podcast, and 2 months ago she was barely recording videos and now she's recording every single week. And I've been able to see from take one to now the most recent episode, what was taking 30 plus minutes to record a video, now it takes 15, and there's only like 3 minutes that have to get cut out versus 15 because she now feels confident speaking to a camera, and now that's helping her speak on calls with clients and speaking on stage and all of these things. But also mostly is like now will be great for her podcast, other people's podcasts. It's like this evolving skill set. And so, honestly, the values that I want my brand and my content to bring to the forefront is creativity, value, and authenticity. Because I think that a lot of people get caught up in building their personal brand and the content online. They want to be like Alex Hormozy when they're not. Like that's not who they actually are. And then suddenly they're on this like what ends up being like a hamster wheel because they're creating content that doesn't even feel fun to them because it doesn't feel like them. And when people can understand like, no, I love finance and I want to talk about businesses and like that lights me up. And you're not like trying to, you can borrow ideas from other people, but you're not like, oh, that's how that person's doing it, so I need to follow every single thing that they do. And then suddenly it's like, well, who's Braden? Like what happens is people lose who they are, and then they burn out, and then we never see them again, or they take a couple years break. And like that's what I want to not have happen. I want to help people tap into like, I'm just making stuff and sharing it with the world, and I'm building my personal brand, but in a way that's like cool. It's going to happen over the long term, and it's going to be more fun. And some people add a lot of stress and pressure to it when a lot of the metrics and stuff are kind of like not in, our control.
So you control what you can control, and you don't control what you can't control.
Yeah, to the best of my ability. I mean, I say that it's hard. It's hard to like, you can't control the numbers of things. You always want them to be better, but I focus on, well, what I can control is putting another thing out there. I can control on trying to make my next video better. And maybe one of them will pop and the metrics will be even better. But like I don't really know. I don't know. You can do all the best practices, and sometimes it just still doesn't like work the way you want it to. And so if you get caught up in feeling bad about that, then it's just gonna be hard to keep making stuff.
So obviously you're making stuff right. One of our big things in just our podcast in general, right, is just business owners and people that are doing business. That was one of
Mhm.
the reasons I reached out to you, because I was like, oh, he's making stuff, he's worked with cool people, right? But also he's a creator and does businesses right now, right?
Mhm.
Even though we had to go try to get this podcast done. When it came to that though, you talked a little bit about your winner mindset, going through the back door, going through the whole process. When it comes to your entrepreneurial spirit, what made you want to go into business? Because first it seems like you just want to be back office creator.
Yeah. No, I mean, it started with the Gary Vee stuff of like all this entrepreneurship stuff, and my immediate thing was I wanted to start a business, and I would always start stuff like I'd like sell golf balls, or I would like play guitar in my front yard and have like a bucket out front, and I would do like photography for people, and I did like a bunch of I was the side hustle king for many years. But then I took a second and I ended up getting some jobs and all that, and I'm very grateful for all those experiences. But then the entrepreneur bug hit me again, and I was like, okay, I think I'm more ready. If I'm honest, I probably would have been. I was more ready in my younger, like getting out of high school than I let myself believe. There's a lot of that like kind of self doubt and stuff that I struggled with, but now I still don't have things like figured out to the extent that I would love them to be. But I'm figuring it out, and I trust myself. And now I have this belief that I can take an idea that I have and I can turn it into a business, and I can turn it into you know, this offer that people will actually want. And it's been really rewarding doing that. And now I'm moving into this phase where, okay, I'm taking control of my own time. Like I'm going to design my life around what I want to focus on, which is spending time with my wife and my cats and creating time to like just do stuff that I really enjoy. And if I'm going to do that, then I need to be running my own business. And if I want to really pull that off and still like be successful, well, what things do I need to change about the way I do business? And so I've been really running myself through like those thought experiments. I don't have the perfect answer yet, but I'm trying it. And that's the freedom that being an entrepreneur has brought me. And now I'm just trying to like tell all my friends, I'm like, you should start your own thing. Like you should just do this. Um, and it's easier for some to start than others, but now I've got the entrepreneurial spirit, like you said, and I finally am just really embracing it because it's time.
I love that. I love that. And I feel like you can't like kill it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can hide it away for a little bit,
Yeah.
but it always comes back. And honestly, like throughout all of I took the jobs that I took, I was always doing stuff on the
Mhm.
side and just always like keeping opportunities going because that's just like I don't know, it's how I'm wired. For better or for worse, sometimes it was like definitely okay, there's too much going on and you got to pull that back. But I've kind of entered the season where I understand what that will look like, and now I'm like, no, let me say no to certain things.
100%. 100%. So I have a selfish question, so I'm just gonna ask it. When it
Okay.
comes to podcasts in general, or just like work of arts online, we have like you can make something and just make it super like cuttable and clickable,
Hmm.
like viral.
Yeah.
Or are you familiar with like Jared Adams
Yep. Hmm.
and
Yeah.
how he had his what was the series? He had a series like that was released once per month when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And
It's
they're like
like
20-minute episodes,
something about
and then
leaders. Yeah.
yeah, leaders create leaders,
Yeah.
and that
There
was
you
the
go.
big push. And I
Yeah.
remember watching those, and I was like, oh, this is like a work of art. This is
Yeah.
amazing. It didn't like get the most views, but it like I don't know, pushed me in entrepreneurship. It impacted me a lot. When it comes to where you should lean toward, what do you think in the like current phase of the internet?
So I would say ultimately it comes down to what do you want to do? Because there are ways to do both. There are things to make things feel like a work of art, but also play some of the best practice games to make them more clickable. However, what I will say is, which one are you talking about now so many years later? You're talking about the one that felt to you like a work of art. And that is also subjective to certain people. But there are some shows that there's just a difference in the quality and the approach to it, and the release schedule, right? Some people feel like they need to release every day, every single week. You said he released about once a month. You're still talking about him. And I know exactly who you're talking about. I watched those too. And I think that is a very interesting point that we kind of just discovered as you asked that question. I think that it would be really hard for a lot of people to make stuff that feels like work of art in their books. So I would say that the most important thing is to just get started, and there's no harm in just getting started. But I would say that sometimes people feel called to make a decision with their content because, oh, well, this might get more clicks. However, there's a lot of things that get a lot of clicks that people don't remember and doesn't stick with them. But if it's like, make this thing that gets a lot of clicks, or make this thing that like you feel really passionate about and you want to do, and it might not get as many views. I mean, look at the result that Gerard created for you. It's pretty cool. Comes down to like what you want to do, though.
For sure. I know the main thing with that show is like, oh, I can watch this over and over and over again. And there's some shows and like some stuff that you're like, even like current event stuff, that's like, okay, this TikTok thing is cool right now, but it's like could be irrelevant in like 3 weeks.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's power in making evergreen content for sure. That's the power of podcasts, I think, more than most mediums, is a lot of episodes of things you can tune into. Like, honestly, probably the only thing we talked about here that would be, it cannot be evergreen would be the TikTok ban. But in general, all this stuff, if someone's listening in 2032, I think it'll still be just as valuable.
I love that. So as we're wrapping up, we have the final encyclopedia where you put your business secret. But before we delve into that secret, what advice do you give to the people that come to you that are looking to start a podcast or struggling?
Yeah. The number one thing that I've leaned into that's been helpful, hopefully I don't sound too much like a broken record, but I say it because I mean it, having worked with creators at all different levels, is define what success looks like to you with whatever it is that you're building, whether it is a podcast, your personal brand where you're just doing blog posts or written posts, whatever it is, define what success looks like for you. Don't base it off of, well, this person achieved this with their brand, so I guess like that's what I need to do, because your lives are totally different and you might not need X, Y, and Z because of that. I saw a great post the other day. Someone was like, as a solopreneur, like you probably might not ever scale past 5 million. And the guy was like, what? And like, I don't want to, like, I am super happy, right? But for other people, they were looking at him as like he was like not doing great. And it's like, no, like he defined his metric of success as, like he was happy with what he was doing. He didn't need to break past the 5 million, and that was a very like helpful thing to see, because that's an example of someone that's chosen to do it. And so if you get clear on that, you can actually probably become more successful faster than you realize. You're also probably a lot closer than you think. And that's been really, really helpful. So that's my biggest advice, because a lot of people, again, they'll get into it and they want the 100,000 followers, they want the virality, and you don't need that. That should just be like a byproduct. Most of the time when things go viral, like it's reaching like random tons of different audiences, and it's not people that like you'll actually would want to keep around in your audience all the time. I've seen mostly. So don't overthink it and just define your metrics of success early on.
Okay. And then finally, what's your business secret? I'm going to come back to the secret at the end of episode 7, or we're just going to follow up. I'm going to take all the secrets from the season, and then we're just going to talk about them.
Love it. Creating content and building your personal brand multiplies your opportunities faster than any other thing that you can do, because you can be in front of so many different people instead of just one-to-one interactions. I'm grateful for this right now because we're getting to meet for the first time officially. But what's also amazing is this episode will go out and people will be able to listen to it time and time again that people I might have not otherwise been aware of or known about me. And that's the power of content. And when you do that, suddenly your surface area for luck really it gets bigger. And suddenly people that you don't even know are paying attention to your content are going to reach out to you and offer you opportunities, offer you a job. Like so many things will happen, but if you are not building your brand, no one's going to know. No one's going to know about you out there. And not like you don't matter, but just in terms of like there's so much going on. And so if people don't see you in their feed, they're not often going to think about you for opportunities. And that is the importance of it. So the secret, honestly, is if you are creating content or you're about to start, you are way ahead of the game than 99% of people. And if you can realize that, it's pretty powerful.
I love that. I love that. And where can people find you?
Yeah.
Or the
best
podcast, Personal Game on Spotify?
Yeah, so the best place to find me, LinkedIn's where I'm most active. You just search Chris Jordan on there. You'll see me on there. Personal brand coach as like one of the subtitles under there. And then, yeah, my podcast, The Personal Brand Game, is available on all podcast platforms. So wherever you listen to them, you can get it there. Release episodes there. Well, soon every week. By the time this comes out every week, I'll get back into it. And yeah, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be on here. Happy to serve. Hopefully people enjoyed this. And if anyone has any follow-up questions for me, feel free to reach out. I'll definitely get back to anybody.
100%, 100%. Thank you for coming to the show. I know as we get going, the winner mindset, entrepreneur spirit, millionaire secrets. And welcome to Beyond the Business. We'll talk later. Bye.